And welcome back. Now, Britain's oldest cinema opened, believe it or not, and I didn't believe this, in 1848 on Regent Street, London. And for well over 100 years, of course, the UK's been at the forefront of what's obviously become a global film and cinema industry. Who needs Hollywood? But when the pandemic hit in March 2020, indoor cinemas were shut for 2 years with estimated losses of £2.6 billion. But after 2 summers of streaming from our sofas, the cinema industry has bounced back here in Britain. This January, box offices across the UK and Ireland reported revenues 88% up on the previous year. And now the industry is moving into a new phase. As from today, cinema goers will be able to show a digital ID for proof of age. I'm delighted to welcome Sean Jones, who's Vice President of Operations for the UK and Ireland for Cineworld, and Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money, is still with us here in the studio. Sean, great to have you with us. I love cinema. I'm a huge cinema goer myself. I'm so glad that cinemas are getting back on their feet. Just before we talk about this new digital ID, how bad was it? Cineworld's obviously one of our leading cinema providers, but across the piece, did we lose many cinemas in the UK?
We lost a few independent cinemas, I think, along the way. I mean, it's been hugely challenging for the industry. And we're not out of the woods yet. But, what we're seeing is some really, really strong product coming through, a great slate between now and the end of the year. And, we're just very excited to welcome customers back to our cinemas.
I was saying earlier in the show, Sean, I'm old enough to remember power cuts in the 70s. I'm also old enough to remember the introduction of VHS and Betamax in the early 1980s, bunking off school to watch The Evil Dead and The Warriors and all the rest of it, The Wanderers. God, I remember those days. But we all said at the time, this must be the death of cinema because we're all going to stay home and watch these VHS, Betamax films. It hasn't happened. People still love going to the cinema. What is it? Is it the big seats? Is it the bucket of popcorn? Is it getting out of the house? Or is it just watching a film knowing that there are others around you? What is the magic of cinema?
Do you know what, Lynn? You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been in cinema since 1984 when I started working in a cinema back in Rhyl in North Wales. And I've been in cinema ever since. And you're absolutely right. Every sort of obstacle, people say this will be the end of the cinema as soon as this new piece of technology arrives. And it's just not the case. People still want the escapism. They still want good value from a visit to the cinema with their family. I mean, at Cineworld, we've been investing in 4DX and ScreenX and IMAX and all those other offers just to make the experience, just let people watch the films the way they want to watch them. And we're so pleased that the customers are coming back, and they are coming back. Well, I mean, this weekend alone, the Top Gun film has broken all records. It's the second biggest opening film this week. It's done, this year. It's done 15.9 million over the opening few days. It's definitely Tom Cruise's biggest release.
Wow.
So it really shows there's an appetite for people to come back to the cinema, but they want a good experience. The key thing is the experience. It's not just about watching a film, it's everything. It's the whole journey.
You a big cinema fan? Do you like going there with your... Are you a salted or sweet popcorn person? That's the main thing.
I don't even like popcorn. Isn't that awful? I don't like popcorn. I love chocolate, though. I love the ice cream. Oh, that's a nightmare.
But why do we keep going back?
I've had a sort of love-hate relationship with cinema, actually. Loved it in my sort of teens and 20s. Absolutely hated it after that. I'm kind of tentative now, and I have to say the Top Gun film is tempting me back for the first time in years. I will be... I think what we're finding now with, entertainment is there's just a lot of other ways. There's the streaming at home, but there is also something about that communal live experience.
You turn your phone off, no one can bother you. It's a proper... Sean just used the word escapism.
Yeah.
It's escapism, and a lot of us feel we need some escapism at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's certainly Top Gun seems to promise that, doesn't it? But I mean, I think Hollywood has to rise up to the challenge. Not just Hollywood, you're talking about here as well. You know, we have to create things, new, fresh ideas people want to watch. Oh, we had a lot of rehashes. I mean, I am keen to see Top Gun, but goodness me, I mean, you know, what's that? We're living back in the 1980s. We've talked a lot in this show about the 70s and the 80s. So I'd like to see some new ideas, which I'm sure will be there. But you know, let's embrace it all. Let's embrace it all. I love the idea that the theatre is now beamed into cinemas, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
you know, let's mix it all up.
Sean, so when I were a lad, films were You, If Anyone Could Watch Them, and then A, and then AA, you had to be 14. I used to get him when I was about 11. Bit of dirt on the top lip to make it look as if I had a moustache coming. And then X. I remember I couldn't see Saturday Night Fever because it was an X. And I wanted to see Saturday.
Right.
Of course, they're much simpler now, 12 and 18. Tell us about this new digital ID. What's the difference with now for kids who want to get into the cinema, making sure that they only see appropriate things?
Yeah, well, you know, for us, like I said about the journey into the cinema, we want to make it as easy as possible and as pain-free, and you know, not just for children but for adults as well. And it's very frustrating, I think, for parents when they have to give their children a passport or some other form of ID to come into the cinema. This does away with all of this. So once signed up, you know, you basically present your app like this at the cinema, and if you can just see in the corner here, when the phone's then tilted, it's got a hologram within the app. So it's very straightforward. It doesn't give too much personal detail out. It just says whether they're over 15, whether they're over 18. It's a fantastic, new piece of technology. And of course, everybody comes to the cinema with smartphones now, so it just makes it easier for everybody all round.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of a hologram on a phone. Otherwise, you could just screenshot it, right? And you could superimpose your own face over your elder brother's over 18 thing. So there's an actual hologram on the phone, like there's a hologram often on banknotes to make sure that they're not frauds. That's
right. And if you tilt the phone, the hologram moves with the phone. And it's a very, very simple process to set it up. You can use the Yoti app or the Partners Post Office ID app. It's already had 11 million downloads already. We are quite excited to see this through. We're having all the staff trained now, so they know what to check for. It's very important for us that, you know, people go into the cinema and they are of the correct age. It's not just about the film, though, is it, Helen? A cinema is often, you know, the centre of an out-of-town shopping centre. It's the centre of a community. It's fabulous if we can keep these cinemas going, and indeed some of those independent cinemas that did lose out, as Sean said, during the pandemic, can get back up on their feet. Yeah, that was, a shame to hear about that, because I think a lot of those independent cinemas are kind of curated by just lovers of film. That's right. They also all are about the experience. Some of them have, you know, those lovely big sofas and chairs, and they do food and, you know, drinks at your seat and all that sort of thing. But, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's often the cinema is alongside the bowling alley and the, little few restaurants and all that, you know. Place where youngsters hang out. It can be the centre of a community. It can be, and yes, the idea, you know, the film is just part of it. It's the going out and doing things, and for many kids, it's getting out of the house and doing your own thing, isn't it? By the way, I like this ID thing. They're going to use that in pubs. It's really interesting, isn't it? I've not heard of that. A hologram on a phone. I tell you this, on my 40th birthday, I went to Sainsbury's to get some gin and I got ID'd. I was very proud of that, Liam, very proud. Helen Thomas there on that bombshell, CEO of Blonde Money. And indeed, Sean Jones, Vice President of Operations for UK and Ireland for Cineworld. Much enjoyed the conversation, Sean, and I love the James Bond backdrop. I'll be getting myself one of those on the money. Now it's time.